glass broke first, a sharp crash across the polished marble floor. The stem of the wine glass snapped like a twig, red liquid bleeding across the white stone. For a moment, the entire room froze, every sound swallowed by the echo of that shatter. And then came the hand, Tyler's hand, the spoiled son of a millionaire, his face twisted with smug satisfaction, his voice dripping with entitlement. He moved without hesitation, fingers wrapping around the neck of the girl who dared stand in his way. His grip was firm, almost rehearsed, as if this act of cruelty was second nature to him. Her name was Maya. She was young, strong, but silent. She had grown up in the shadows of this mansion, the daughter of the housekeeper. A girl whose mother's back had bent over these polished floors for years. A girl who had been told since childhood to keep her head low, not to speak unless spoken to, and to never ever forget her place. The mansion was her cage, even if she had memorized every corner of it. She was allowed to live in it, but never belong. Now, with Tyler's hand pressing against her throat, those years of quiet humiliation condensed into this one moment. The veins on his hand bulged, his knuckles pale as he squeezed harder. He leaned closer, his words sharp, cruel, and final. "Know your place," he whispered. The words cut deeper than his grip. They were meant to reduce her to nothing, to remind her that in his eyes she was invisible. But Maya didn't flinch. Her wide eyes locked onto his. There was no begging, no tears, just a steady stare. Tyler mistook her silence for fear, but behind those eyes something stirred. A storm. For years she had carried the weight of insults, the sting of being overlooked, the ache of watching her mother humiliated again and again. Each moment had hardened her, sharpened her. And though no one in that mansion knew it, Maya carried a secret. She wasn't just a housekeeper's daughter. She was a fighter, a boxer, a girl who had stepped into rings with opponents far more brutal than Tyler's arrogance. The mansion had always been her prison, but the boxing gym had been her sanctuary. The gym smelled of sweat, leather, and determination. Its walls didn't care about last names or bank accounts. They only respected discipline. She had learned to take hits, to stand again, to never surrender. Every bruise she carried was a lesson. Every scar was a reminder that pain could be transformed into strength. And here, in this marble hallway with Tyler's grip on her throat, that strength simmered beneath her stillness. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Somewhere in the house, servants froze. They had seen Tyler's cruelty before, heard his taunts, but none had dared intervene. His father's money protected him like a shield. His last name was untouchable. But tonight, something was different. Maya's body remained calm, but her heart pounded with memory. She remembered her mother's tired hands scrubbing these same floors. She remembered being told, "Keep quiet, Maya, don't make trouble. We need this job." She remembered the laughter at school when kids discovered she lived in the mansion, not as family, but as the help's child. And now she remembered the long hours training, fists clenched, breath controlled, learning how to channel all the anger and shame into power. Tyler smirked, enjoying the sight of her stillness. He thought he had won. He thought he had reminded her of her place. He didn't see the storm behind her silence. He didn't realize that every insult, every humiliation had been fuel. What he saw as weakness was only patience. The glass shards glittered at their feet. The silence pressed harder than his grip. And in that silence the story began. Not with submission, not with surrender, but with the promise of something unforgettable. Tyler believed he was teaching Maya a lesson. But in truth, it was Tyler who was about to be schooled. Because there is always a breaking point. Always a moment when the one who has been pushed too far finally pushes back. And as Tyler's fingers dug into Maya's skin, as his cruel whisper echoed through the marble halls, the clock began to tick. Something was shifting, something dangerous, something he never saw coming. And that's the moment where everything changed. Not because of his grip, but because of hers. Not because of his cruelty, but because of her silence. Silence that wasn't fear, but fire waiting to be unleashed. The spoiled son of a millionaire had no idea he had just awakened a storm. A storm wrapped in the body of the housekeeper's daughter. A storm that had fists trained to deliver more truth than his wealth could ever silence. And that's where the story begins. The hand around her neck. the veins pressing against her skin. The whisper meant to break her spirit, the silence that was anything but surrender. The room frozen in tension, servants holding their breath, and a girl whose eyes promised something unforgettable. Because Maya was not just a daughter of the help. She was not just another shadow in the mansion. She was a fighter, a boxer, a storm waiting to strike. And Tyler, in all his arrogance, was about to learn a lesson no fortune could protect him from. The mansion walls had seen many things, but what they were about to witness would change them forever. The hook was set, the silence was alive, and the storm was only just beginning. Tyler lived in a world where consequences did not exist. Every door opened before him, not because of who he was, but because of the name stitched across his life, like a golden badge. Teachers at his school lowered their voices when addressing him, not daring to correct his arrogance. Principals overlooked his violence, brushing it away as youthful mistakes. And his friends, if you could call them that, fed on his cruelty, laughing too loudly when he mocked others, cheering when he humiliated someone weaker. In the mansion, he walked with the swagger of a king in his palace. Servants darted out of his path, lowering their heads as if he carried fire in his eyes. He spoke to them in short, cutting sentences like they were less than human. To Tyler, money wasn't just power. It was a weapon, and he wielded it with precision. Maya had witnessed it all. She had watched from the corners of polished rooms hidden in plain sight. She had seen her mother shrink under the weight of his insults. She remembered one evening when Tyler spilled juice across the carpet. His laugh echoed through the room as he snapped his fingers, pointing at Maya's mother. "Clean it up," he had sneered. "That's all you're good for." Maya had wanted to scream, to fight back, but her mother's gentle hand stopped her. "We need this job," her mother whispered. And so silence became survival. But silence comes at a cost. Each insult left a bruise, not on skin, but on dignity. Each threat, "One word and you're out of this house," was a chain tightening around her family's neck. Tyler knew it. He enjoyed it. The housekeeper's daughter was invisible to him, except when he wanted to remind her that she would never belong. And now, his grip on Maya's throat was more than physical. It was history repeating itself. It was a symbol, a declaration that no matter what she dreamed, no matter what she fought for, she would always be beneath him. He leaned closer, his breath sour with arrogance, and hissed words that were sharper than glass. "You'll never be more than the help's kid." The words sank deep, not just into her ears but into her chest. They echoed against every memory of being dismissed, overlooked, degraded. But what Tyler couldn't see was how those echoes were changing shape inside her. They weren't crushing her. They were igniting her. Every insult became a spark. Every dismissal became a drumbeat. Every bruise life had given her was a reminder that she had endured worse and risen stronger. Maya stood still, her silence heavy, and Tyler mistook it for fear. He smirked, tightening his grip, proud of his control. But Maya wasn't afraid. She was remembering. She remembered the gym on the edge of town, its walls cracked, its floor scarred. She remembered the smell of sweat and leather, the sting of rope burns, the echoes of punches hitting heavy bags. She remembered her trainer's words, sharp and commanding. "Don't fight with anger. Fight with control. Anger makes you sloppy. Discipline makes you dangerous." She remembered the long nights after school, her knuckles wrapped in cloth, her breath steady as she pushed her body past exhaustion. Tyler didn't know any of this. To him, Maya was just the housekeeper's daughter, a shadow in his home. But to Maya, every moment in that gym had been preparation for life's cruelty. She had faced opponents taller, stronger, and meaner than Tyler could ever dream of being. And she had survived. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. Her wide eyes weren't filled with fear. They were watching, waiting, deciding when the moment would come. Around them, the house was still. The servants who lingered in the hallway peeked from behind doors, eyes wide, hearts racing. They had seen Tyler's violence before. They had heard his laughter as he crushed spirits. But none had dared to intervene. His father's wealth was a shield, protecting him from the consequences of his cruelty. But tonight something felt different. Tonight the silence was heavier. It pressed against the walls, against their chests, against the marble floor. And in that silence, Maya's resolve grew. She thought of her mother. She thought of all the nights she had whispered, "Hold on, Maya, just hold on." She thought of every insult, every dismissal, every cruel laugh that had chipped away at her dignity. And she thought of her fists, her training, her discipline. She thought of the storm inside her, waiting for release. Tyler didn't see it. He was too busy enjoying his performance, too blind with arrogance to notice the shift in the air. He believed he had already won. He believed the housekeeper's daughter was nothing but another servant, another shadow, another life meant to bend beneath his weight. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that he had just set the stage for his own undoing. The pressure around Maya's throat burned. Her chest ached. Humiliation pressed down harder than his fingers. But within that humiliation, a seed of defiance cracked open. She had taken hits before. She had been knocked down before. But she had always risen, always, and now, with Tyler's sneer hovering inches from her face, with his poison words dripping into her ears, she felt that same strength rise again. The mansion was about to change. The silence was about to break. And Tyler, the spoiled son of a millionaire, was about to learn that not every shadow bows forever. The tension built like a storm cloud, thick and electric. Tyler tightened his grip, believing he was in control. Maya remained still, but inside her body, every muscle, every memory, every scar was preparing. He thought he was teaching her her place. But what he didn't realize was that she already knew it. And it wasn't beneath him. The silence stretched, unbearable, as if the world itself leaned in to watch. Servants held their breath. Maya's eyes locked on his, steady, unblinking. And in that locked stare, something shifted. Because the girl Tyler thought he owned, the girl he believed would always stay silent, was seconds away from shattering his illusion. The storm was ready. And when it broke, the mansion would never be the same again. Would never be the same again. It happened faster than the blink of an eye. 1 second, Tyler's hand pressed cruelly against Maya's throat, his smirk carved deep into his face, his eyes savoring her silence. The next second, the silence shattered. Her hand rose with precision, sharp and controlled, prying his grip from her neck. The veins in his hand strained, but her strength was steady, practiced. Tyler's eyes widened, surprise flickering across his arrogance. He had never been resisted before. Not by servants, not by teachers, not by anyone. Maya's body shifted without thought. It wasn't rage driving her. Rage would have made her sloppy. It wasn't rebellion either. Rebellion came with desperation. This was something different. This was discipline. Years of training lived inside her muscles, inside her breath. She dropped into a stance she had practiced hundreds of times in a dusty gym, where the lights flickered and the floorboards creaked. That gym was her true home, not this mansion of glass and marble. Her fist moved like memory, straight, clean, controlled. The sound of impact cracked louder than the shattering glass from before. Tyler staggered back, clutching his jaw, his body colliding with the marble wall. His smirk dissolved, replaced by disbelief. His eyes searched her face, desperate to make sense of what had just happened. The help's daughter? The quiet shadow in the hallways? A boxer? His mind scrambled. For the first time in his life, Tyler Ross, the spoiled millionaire's son, had no script. He had been untouchable his whole life. His money was armor. His father's name was a shield. No one had ever dared to touch him. And now, a girl he considered beneath him had just knocked him down. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Servants froze in doorways, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. They had seen Tyler torment, insult, and belittle, but never had they seen him lose. Never had they seen him stripped of his arrogance in an instant. The marble mansion, usually echoing with his voice, now held only silence. Maya's chest rose and fell, steady and calm. Her fists were lowered, but her stance remained. She wasn't finished, and Tyler knew it. His mind raced with humiliation, with disbelief, with fear he didn't yet understand. The housekeeper's daughter had just rewritten the rules, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't the one in control. Tyler staggered to his feet, anger burning his face red. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. You think you can hit me?" His words were shaky, the authority stripped from them. He took a step forward, his arrogance desperate to return, but Maya didn't move back. She held her ground, her eyes locked on his, steady and unblinking. It wasn't just a punch, it was a declaration. It was every insult, every dismissal, every humiliation condensed into one clean strike. And the mansion walls themselves seemed to understand. They had absorbed his arrogance for years, but tonight, they absorbed something new. A shift in power, a shift in truth. Maya's mind flickered back to the gym, to her trainer's voice reminding her, a good fighter doesn't fight for ego. Good fighter fights for respect. She wasn't here to destroy Tyler. She wasn't here to prove her fists were stronger. She was here to reclaim the dignity he had tried to strip from her mother, from anyone he considered beneath him. Tyler wiped the blood from his lip, staring at his own hand in disbelief. He wasn't used to pain. Pain belonged to others, not him. He had spent his whole life avoiding consequences, believing himself immune. Now, the sting on his face was a lesson he couldn't erase with money. The servants whispered behind closed doors, their voices trembling. They knew the risks. They knew Tyler could retaliate, his father could punish. But deep inside, hidden in their chests, was something new. Hope. For the first time, someone had stood against him. For the first time, someone had refused to bow. Maya's silence still lingered, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was command. She didn't need to speak. Her actions had said more than words ever could. She had revealed herself not as a shadow, not as invisible, but as someone who could not be broken. Tyler took another step forward, his body shaking, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. He wanted to lunge, to reassert control, but something inside him hesitated. He had seen her stance, he had felt her fist, and deep down, he knew. If he tried again, she would strike harder. The boy who had once believed himself untouchable now stood vulnerable, exposed and afraid. The mansion had become a stage, and every servant was an audience. They watched, waiting, holding their breath. They had prayed for this day but never believed it would come. And now, before their eyes, the spoiled son of a millionaire stood face to face with the truth. Respect cannot be bought, and power built on cruelty is fragile. Maya didn't step forward. She didn't gloat. She simply stood tall, her presence louder than any punch. She was finished proving herself. The silence after the strike was her victory, and in that silence, Tyler's arrogance cracked like glass. His jaw ached, his pride bled, his certainty about the world began to dissolve. The girl he thought invisible had made him visible, to himself, to everyone watching, to the truth he had spent his life avoiding. The spoiled son had no script. The boxer had no need for one. And though Tyler didn't realize it yet, his life had just shifted forever. Because when the first punch lands, it doesn't just hit the body, it hits the soul. And Maya's first punch had just shaken the foundation of everything he believed. Foundation of everything he believed. The mansion vibrated with silence. The servants' whispers swelled in the corners. Tyler's breath came heavy, uncertain. Maya's stance softened, but her presence didn't. She had flipped the story. She had rewritten the ending, and Tyler, he wasn't finished falling yet. The storm had only begun. Tyler's body hit the floor with a heavy thud. The sound echoed through the marble hall like a judgment passed down by something greater than wealth or power. His hand shot to his jaw, fingers trembling, blood staining the edge of his lip. For the first time in his life, he wasn't laughing, he wasn't sneering, he wasn't in control. He was broken open, humiliated, exposed. His eyes darted around the hallway, desperate, almost pleading. The servants still lingered at the edges, frozen, silent. They had seen him win every battle before. Tonight they were seeing something different, something they would never forget. Maya didn't move. She didn't rush forward. She didn't press the advantage. She simply stood there, tall and steady, her fists relaxed by her sides. The silence between them grew heavier. It wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of power. Her breathing was controlled, her face calm. She had already won, not because of her fist, but because she refused to be dragged down to his level. Tyler coughed, anger bubbling inside him, but it had no place to go. He wanted to shout, to threaten, to remind her of his last name, but the words never came. His pride choked him harder than his hand had choked her minutes earlier. His lips trembled as he spat blood onto the marble, trying to summon the arrogance that had carried him all his life. But arrogance couldn't save him now. Maya stepped closer, slow, deliberate. Each step echoed in the hallway, each step a reminder that she was no longer the silent girl in the shadows. Tyler flinched as she drew near, his back pressing against the wall, his eyes wide with something unfamiliar, fear. She leaned down, her face close to his, her voice low but steady, slicing through the silence like steel. "My mother may clean your house," she said, her tone calm yet unshakable. "But I will never clean your shoes." The words struck harder than her punch. They weren't just for Tyler. They were for every servant hiding in the corners, every worker who had swallowed their pride to keep a paycheck, every soul who had endured humiliation in silence. Those words lifted them, gave them something they had never dared to claim before: dignity. The hallway remained still, but its energy had shifted. Tyler's arrogance crumbled like dust. His shoulders sagged, his eyes dropped. For the first time in his life, he looked small. All the wealth in the world couldn't shield him from this truth. Money could buy silence. It could buy loyalty. It could even buy fear. But it could never buy respect. And tonight, respect had been taken from him. One strike, one stare, one sentence at a time. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't strike again. She didn't need to. She had made her point, and it was louder than any punch. Her silence, her calm, her dignity, that was the victory. She turned her back on him, her shoulders straight, her steps firm. Turning her back wasn't weakness. It was the ultimate insult to his arrogance. She didn't fear retaliation. She didn't fear his father's wealth. She had already stripped him of the one thing he valued most: control. Tyler sat slumped against the wall, his hand still clutching his face, his mind spinning. For years, he believed his last name gave him the right to humiliate anyone. For years, he believed fear was the same thing as respect. But now, staring at the girl he had once mocked as invisible, he realized how wrong he had been. The servants, still silent, began to shift. Their eyes met one another, something unspoken passing between them. For so long, they had accepted his cruelty as inevitable. Tonight, they saw that cruelty wasn't invincible. Dignity, once buried, could rise again. The marble mansion, once a palace of wealth, had become a stage for transformation. Tyler Ross, the spoiled son of a millionaire, had been brought to his knees not by fists alone, but by truth. Maya stopped at the staircase, her body silhouetted against the chandelier's golden light. She turned her head slightly, her voice carrying one last time. "Respect those you dismiss," she said, her words measured, final. "Because one day they may be the ones who remind you of your humanity." And with that, she walked away. Tyler stayed on the floor, his body shaking, his pride shattered. The weight of her words lingered in the air, pressing down harder than his father's fortune ever could. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that money could not save him from the truth. That wealth could build walls, but it could not build character. The servants stepped back into their roles, but something had changed. Their eyes were no longer lowered. Their silence was no longer submission. They had witnessed a shift in power, a reminder that even the smallest voice, when spoken with dignity, could silence the loudest arrogance. Maya returned to her mother's quarters, her fists unwrapped, her heart steady. She didn't celebrate. She didn't boast. She simply sat with her mother, who looked at her with tears in her eyes. Not tears of fear, but tears of pride. For years, she had told her daughter to keep quiet, to endure, to survive. Tonight, she realized survival wasn't enough. Tonight, her daughter had shown her what it meant to truly live, with dignity, with courage, with strength. And as the night fell over the mansion, the lesson remained, clear and universal. Dignity cannot be bought. Power built on cruelty always collapses. And respect, true respect, is earned not with money, not with fear, but with humanity. Tyler would never forget this night. His jaw would heal. His pride might patch itself together, but the scar left on his spirit would remain. Every time he walked through that hallway, he would remember the sound of that punch, the weight of those words, and the truth that no fortune could erase. And Maya, she would carry this night not as a story of violence, but as a story of justice. A story that proved even the smallest person in the grandest mansion could change everything with a single act of courage. The mansion had been a place of wealth. Tonight it became a place of truth. And truth, unlike money, never fades. Truth, unlike money, never fades.